Hello friends, I welcome each one of you on this 25th day of this long series of 31 days. And today, as scheduled, as discussed yesterday, that we were supposed to start late because of the other webinar, which got over at 6 p.m. So we'll be now starting the question and answer series because yesterday we have completed the entire CGST Act, and before starting the IGST, uh, the uh, the query session was due, and in spite of waiting and taking that query session tomorrow, we decided that we'll take the query session today, and then from tomorrow we'll be starting the IGST series. So let us start the query session, friends. Team, allow me to please use the screen. I want to share my screen, please allow me. Shalin, are you there? Friends, just give me 1 minute.
Hello. हेलो हाँ अलाउ करवानी थी स्क्रीन अच्छा हाँ
सॉरी सर, मेरे यहाँ माय नेटवर्क का थोड़ा इशू हो गया था. नाउ वर्किंग परफेक्टली.
हेलो आई एम ऑडिबल शैलिन भाई
यस सर, परफेक्टली.
okay friends, today we are starting the fourth query session of our 31st day GST refresher course, and the first query is regarding section 67, power of inspection, search and seizures. Query: does the proper officer under GST law has the power to seize the unaccounted cash found at the principal place of business during the search and seizure conducted under section 67 of the act? Sir, please.
I'm sorry, friends. I was muted. I'm repeating again the answer to the question which is asked. As per me, these cash, whether it is accounted or unaccounted, it cannot be seized at the time of search, because under section 67 subsection 2, the seizure can take place of goods or books or documents or things, and cash is not falling within the definition of goods. It is specifically excluded from that, and it is not books or the documents or things, and therefore it cannot be seized at the time of search. The proper officer do not have any such power of seizure of the cash, whether it is accounted or it is unaccounted.
Okay, sir. Next query. One of our client manufacturer come exported 95 of 99% is the export, has exported goods, but a clerical mistake was made while filing 3B returns. He shows zero rated sales as interstate sales, and there is a mismatch in invoice at IceGate, and refund is pending. Whom we should approach as our claim is rejected by jurisdiction officer?
See, first and foremost, you will have to identify whether it is a export with the payment of IGST or not. If it is a payment of IGST and then it is exported, then in that case, the mapping is required, and automatically and by default, the shipping bill per se will become the refund application, and you are not supposed to file any separate application. But if it is not the case, then in that case, you will have to file a application for refund. Now, what I presume from this question is that you have filed, but you have shown the entries incorrectly in GSTR 3B, and since the entries were shown incorrectly, uh, there are two ways. One, you approach the jurisdictional officer, identify and prove him that this is the eligible refund which you have, and therefore try to convince him that he can allow you to get the refund manually. And if he does not allows, because he will say that this is a system dependent and we do not have any access to the system, we cannot process it manually, then in that case, uh, either the department or the government can be approached, wherein they may start manual processing that they have started earlier also at 2 or 3 occasions. And if that is also not possible, then I'm afraid you will have to file a writ petition before the honorable jurisdictional high court, and accordingly you will have to get the relief. There is no other way.
Okay, sir. The next query regarding the power of inspection, search and seizures. Please share the section of Code of Criminal Procedure 1973, that is CRPC, which are relevant for search and seizures under GST.
There are many sections pertaining to this. Section 95 is relevant, section 100 is relevant, section 102 is relevant. There are many sections which are relevant, but it depends. And as I've already said, that I'm certainly going to cover these issues, and we are going to have a separate session for the sections of the allied laws which are relevant for the purpose of search and seizure or for the taxation laws. So certainly we are going to have a detailed session for that. So please give me time till that period. Please wait. We'll be having a session for that, uh, which will be dealing with all the sections of the allied laws which are applicable to the taxation rules. Maybe it is related to someone, maybe it is related to inspection, search or seizure, maybe it is related to some other thing, or the provisional attachment or the arrest. We'll be touching upon those sections. Confirm. It will take some time, but certainly we are going to have a session on that.
Okay. The next question is, if during the inspection proceeding, physical stocks found is worth 1 crore, while the stock is in books is of 60 lakhs only, can the department seize all the goods worth rupees 1 crore, or only the differential goods which are liable to confiscation as per section 130? Also, can they seal the godown itself which contains all the goods?
See, so far as first question is concerned, wherein the goods worth 1 crore is found, whereas the recorded value of stock is only 60 lakhs, that means 40 lakhs is found, which is not recorded properly, and it is squarely falling within the provisions of section 130, and therefore the goods are certainly liable for confiscation. Now, just being liable for confiscation does not mean that the goods have will have to their level. They will have to give an opportunity of being heard, and then thereafter they can confiscate the goods. But certainly they cannot confiscate the entire goods. That means the goods which are recorded, they cannot confiscate it, as per my view. Secondly, so far as sealing of the godown is concerned, again I am of the view that they do not have any power of sealing, putting a seal to the godown, unless we are not helping them in their search activity, or we are avoiding the search, and we are running away. Then in that case they can, for temporary basis, they can put a seal on the godown, and wherein they can say that as and when you will come and you will cooperate with the search proceedings and the search will be concluded, we'll open up the seal. But there are instances I've come across, there are instances and there are cases wherein the seal has been put in and the godown is sealed completely, which as per me is certainly without the authority of law. They cannot do that. They do not have any power in this law, GST law, so far as my knowledge is concerned, that they can seal any place. They can open the seal, that power they have. They can seize the goods or documents or belongings or the things, but they cannot seal it.
Next question, sir. Whether the word suppression of facts should also be read in conjunction with the with and in continuous of words fraud and willful misstatement, and so the words suppression of facts should also take color from those words and should be the with malified intention or with mansara. Please share your point of view.
See, we all are aware that there is no proper definition of the term suppression of facts in the law, but the explanation 2 to section 74 provides the meaning of expression suppression, wherein they have said that the suppression is classified in this fashion कि जब आपसे कोई document मांगे जाए आप नहीं दें, जब कोई information मांगी जाए वो आप गलत दें, all those things are happening with the intention to evade tax, then in that case it becomes the search. Sorry, it becomes or it falls into the definition of suppression. Now, when we read section 74, allow me to just see the provision. When we read section 74, it says where it appears to the proper officer that any tax has not been paid or short paid or erroneously refunded, or where input tax credit has been wrongly availed or utilized by reason of fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of fact to evade tax. So to evade tax, so the word used is to evade tax, and fraud, willful misstatement or suppression, the word is or between them, and therefore I would say that these three are independent terms. Either there can be a fraud, or there can be a willful misstatement, or there can be suppression of facts, but the intention has to be the evasion of tax, and then it will be covered under section 74. I believe this was your question, that whether it can be read in conjunction with each other, or those three terms are independent. So as per me, these three terms are independent.
Okay. Next question. Hello, sir. What is the meaning of the word things under section 67? Can cash be called things?
See, to be very honest, the term things is not defined anywhere. So we'll have to refer the dictionary meaning of it. And as per the dictionary meaning, and to my understanding, I'm not going into the dictionary meaning as of now, but to my understanding, cash cannot be called as things. It cannot fall within the purview of things, and therefore, the question which I think you are asking also is the same as the first question was, that whether cash can be seized. The answer is no. Cash will not fall within the definition of or within the meaning of term things, and therefore it should not be. Plus interpretation का जब हम rule पढ़ते हैं ना, तो interpretation के rule में जिन शब्दों के साथ में वो जुड़ा हुआ होता है, उसी का कलर तो नहीं मैं बोल सकता कि ले लेता है, लेकिन उसी के साथ में आप उसको समझने की कोशिश करते हैं. The books, documents or things, so something related to physical form, which is or on which some recording is being done, that can be considered as things for the purpose or for the limited purpose of this section, and therefore I believe cash will not be falling within the purview of things, and therefore it cannot be seized.
Okay, sir. Next question. This is regarding cancellation or suspension of registration. What if no ITC had been availed in case of any goods or capital goods? In that case, also tax is required to be paid. And other question, what is the output tax payable on such goods or tax on the transaction value of such capital goods? Even no sales of such goods or capital goods, as mentioned in section 29/5. What does it mean in para 4C of schedule 2?
To be very
This is
honest,
not
I'm not
regarding
able
the
to get
fixed.
the question. No, I'm not able to get the question correctly. But जो पहला question उन्होंने पूछा है कि what if no ITC has been availed in case of goods or capital goods? So, are you asking this question from the perspective of taxability? If it is from the perspective of taxability कि जब हम इसको सेल करेंगे उस पे ITC नहीं लिया है और इसको हम सेल करेंगे तो उस पे टैक्स नहीं लगना चाहिए, I don't think that will be the case. Whether you have taken that ITC or not, it does not make any difference on your liability to make payment of tax at the time of outward supply. So ये तो मैं बता सकता हूँ. दूसरा जो था, what is output tax payable on such goods or the tax on transaction value of such capital goods? Even no sales of such goods or capital goods. I'm not understanding this question. I'm sorry, I could not make it out. As mentioned in 29.5, let me just go through the provision what is specified in section 29.5. Section 29.5 says every registered person whose registration is cancelled shall pay an amount by way of debit in the electronic credit ledger or electronic cash ledger equivalent to the credit of input tax in respect of input held in stock or input contained in semi-finished or finished in stock or capital goods or plant and machinery on the day immediately preceding the day of such cancellation or the output tax payable of such goods, whichever is higher. No, in this case, I don't think that if you have not availed ITC, you will fall into this. Let me read it again. It says every registered person whose registration is cancelled shall pay an amount. So a person whose registration is cancelled, he will pay an amount by way of debit in the electronic credit ledger or cash ledger. So that is the amount to be debited. Now, what is the amount to be debited? Equivalent to the credit of input tax in respect of input held in stock, held in semi-finished or finished goods, और कैपिटल गुड्स और प्लांट एंड मशीनरी ऑन द डेट इमीडिएटली प्रीसीडिंग द डेट ऑफ कैंसिलेशन. तो उस दिन जितना भी आपके पास स्टॉक पड़ा होगा उसका आपको रिवर्सल करने या डेबिट करने की बात कर रहा है. बट अगर आपने वो क्रेडिट लिया ही नहीं है गुड्स के केस में, जो आपने क्रेडिट लिया ही नहीं है, तो मेरे हिसाब से उस पर रिवर्सल का क्वेश्चन नहीं आएगा. लेकिन दूसरा जो लिंब है ऑन द आउटपुट टैक्स पेबल ऑन सच गुड्स विच एवर इज हायर. तो इफ यू आर सप्लाइंग दोज गुड्स फर्दर, then whatever will be the output tax, you will be liable for that. So you will be liable for that. But let me understand this question in this fashion कि मैंने goods खरीदे थे, वो taxable goods थे और मेरा registration cancel हो गया, मैंने उस पर credit नहीं लिया. फिर मेरा registration cancel होने के बाद जो मेरे पास stock पड़ा था वो stock मैंने sale कर दिया. If this is a case, then also if it is an output liability which is there on this supply, which is outward supply, तो मेरे हिसाब से वो liability आएगा. Question of reversal may not arise because you have not taken that, but at the time of outward supply the liability is certain. आप registered नहीं है, even then you are a taxable person because you are liable to be registered. So आपको liability तो आएगा and you will have to pay that liability. And you have asked something, what is mean para 4C of schedule 2? Let me just go through that also. 4C, it is again transfer of business assets. So I think your question is more pertaining to capital assets, and uske hisab se it says where any person ceases to be a taxable person. When if any person ceases to be a taxable person, meaning thereby when your registration, you are cancelling your registration, or you are getting your registration cancelled or suspended voluntarily when your liability or when your aggregate turnover is below 20 lakhs. तो अगर उस केस में रहते हो तो आप टैक्सेबल पर्सन ही नहीं रहते, तब तो मेरा आंसर भी चेंज हो जाएगा जो मैंने पहले दिया था. बिकॉज इफ यू आर नॉट अ टैक्सेबल पर्सन एंड इफ यू आर नॉट लायबल फॉर रजिस्ट्रेशन, देन आउटवर्ड सप्लाई पे भी आपका टैक्स नहीं लगेगा. तो पहला जो मैंने एग्जांपल दिया था कि जहाँ पे आपने गुड्स खरीदे उसके बाद आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन कैंसिल हो गया, लेकिन आप लायबल फॉर रजिस्ट्रेशन अगर नहीं थे, इफ यू आर प्रिज्यूमिंग दैट अर्लियर आई हैव प्रिज्यूम्ड दैट यू आर लायबल फॉर रजिस्ट्रेशन, बट नाउ आई एम प्रिज्यूमिंग लुकिंग टू दिस क्वेश्चन ऑफ योर्स that I was not liable for registration, मेरा 20 लाख से कम का टर्नओवर था, then in that case my liability on output supply will not arise. Where any person ceases to be a taxable person, any goods forming part of the assets of any business carried on by him shall be deemed to be supplied by him in the course or furtherance of business immediately preceding the he ceases to be a taxable person, unless the business is transferred as a going concern to another person, or the business is carried on by a personal representative who is deemed to be a taxable person. Okay, so it is simply clarifying. It is simply clarifying that the taxability will arise on what. So I think you might be clear about it. Let me once again reiterate everything. पहला आपने बोला कि आपने ITC नहीं लिया, तो यानी I am presuming that you have not claimed ITC on the capital goods. Now you are supplying those goods. So at the time of supply, I need to see whether you are liable for registration or not. If you are not liable for registration, और आपका कैंसिल हो गया यानी 20 लाख से कम आपका टर्नओवर है, तो उस केस में आप आउटपुट सप्लाई जब करेंगे तो आपके ऊपर कोई लायबिलिटी नहीं आएगी. Yes, next.
Okay, sir. Next question. Whether stock short at the time of inspection against the books of accounts, it will be at section 73 or section 74.
See, 73 or 74 depends. Like 73 is where there is no fraud, suppression, or willful misstatement. Now it is being said that at the time of inspection, the books of accounts were short. So, do you mean to say that the recorded stock was 1 crore and the actual stock was 80 lakhs? So in that case, whether this is what you are telling कि 20 लाख रुपए short था, जो actual physical stock था, so in that case, there can be two ways. One, you have actually sold it. You have actually sold the goods, but the invoice was pending or invoice was generated, but it was not recorded. अगर ऐसा केस है, तब तो आप 73, 74 में किसी में नहीं आओगे, वॉलंटरी पेमेंट कर सकते हो. और अगर होगा भी तो there is no fraud, so you will be in section 73 because the answer cannot be a straight answer to this question. But अगर ऐसा है कि वो 1 करोड़ रुपए का स्टॉक बुक्स में दिख रहा है और आपके एक्चुअल स्टॉक 80 लाख ही है, जो मुझे लगता है कि अपोजिट सिचुएशन होता है जहाँ पे फ्रॉड का केस होता है. कभी भी ऐसा सिचुएशन नहीं होता कि बुक्स में ज्यादा है और एक्चुअल में कम है. लेकिन मान लेते हैं कि आपका एक्चुअल में कम था, तो डिपार्टमेंट ये प्रिज्यूम करेगा कि आपने उसको सप्लाई कर दिया है और आपने उसको रिकॉर्ड नहीं किया है. उस सिचुएशन में दे विल कवर यू अंडर द फ्रॉड कैटेगरी एंड इट विल बी falling into section 74. So fraud या suppression में वो आपको ले जाएंगे and accordingly they will take the proceedings further.
Okay. Next question regarding recovery of tax. Whether notice can be issued to the debtors of the defaulter.
I don't understand who is the defaulter, but yes, if I assume that that by defaulter you mean the person who is liable for payment of tax and against whom the recovery proceedings are initiated, then in that case, yes, the notice can be issued to the debtor of the defaulter or the taxable person. Now simple सा है, जो 79(1) clause C में जो चीजें थी, जो बैंक को आप लिख सकते हैं, similarly you can write to the debtors also. They have that power. Garnishi they have. Yes.
Okay. Next. Is tax has been collected and not paid, whether it can be assumed that there is no limitation period for recovery as the section has been separately mentioned and there is no time limit mentioned in section 76.
I think there is a time limit of 1 year. I believe there is a time limit of 1 year. Section 76. Let me just go through the provision. But so far as I remember, there is a time limit of 1 year within which it has to be done. What they are saying is, they are saying that they will have to issue a notice in these circumstances. Now you are correct that for the purpose of issuance of notice, the time limit is not specified. For the purpose of issuance of notice, the time limit is not specified. The time limit is specified for the purpose of issuance or adjudicating the matter, and it is written in section 76 subsection 6 that the proper officer shall issue an order within 1 year from the date of issuance of the notice. Then yes, I can assume that there is no time limit for the purpose of issuance of notice, and this again is a case wherein you have collected the tax. So anyways if you have collected the tax, then anyways you are liable, and there is no time limit for the issuance of show cause notice under this section, and it can be issued, but it needs to be adjudicated within 1 year.
Okay. Next question, sir. Please explain section 75 subsection 11 with practical example with a plain regarding it seems to be a dangerous provision as the time limit for issue of order gets extended, which extend the limitation period.
See, to be very honest, section 25 deals with the cases wherein the general provisions are with relation to the determination of tax liability, and it is giving you an exception wherein कुछ पीरियड जो आपके अपील के ड्यूरेशन के पीरियड्स वगैरह थे वो एक्सक्लूड किए जा रहे हैं, बट दैट इज ऑलवेज अ लॉ. I think in all the laws wherein any proceedings which are going on with relation to appeals or revision or rectification, those periods are excluded for the limitation. So I don't think there is any difference, but still you have asked, so let me go through the provision and try to explain. It said an issue on which the appellate authority or the appellate tribunal or the high court has given its decision which is prejudicial to the interest of revenue in some other proceedings, and an appeal to the appellate tribunal or high court or supreme court against such decision of the appellate authority or appellate tribunal or high court is pending. Meaning thereby कोई appellate authority ने decision लिया, उसके against में आपने ट्राइब्यूनल में फाइल किया, कोई ट्राइब्यूनल ने दिया जो उसके अगेंस्ट में आप हाई कोर्ट में चले गए, और कोई हाई कोर्ट ने दिया जिसके अगेंस्ट में आप सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चले गए, एंड दैट इज पेंडिंग. द पीरियड स्पेंट बिटवीन द डेट ऑफ डिसीजन ऑफ द अपीलेट अथॉरिटी, तो जो अपीलेट अथॉरिटी ने जब डिसीजन दिया था वो डेट से, एंड दैट ऑफ द अपीलेट ट्रिब्यूनल और द डेट ऑफ डिसीजन ऑफ द अपीलेट, I'm sorry, just a minute. The period is spent between the date of decision of the appellate authority and that of the appellate tribunal, or the date of decision of the appellate tribunal and that of the high court. यानी next step जब भी है, or that the date of the high court and that of the supreme court. तो इसके बीच का जो पीरियड था, जब पहली अथॉरिटी ने दिया और जब दूसरी अथॉरिटी ने दिया, इस दोनों के बीच का जो पीरियड था वो एक डिस्प्यूटेड पीरियड था या लिटिगेटिव पीरियड था. That period के लिए it is being said that shall be excluded in computing the period referred to in subsection 10, that is 3 years, or subsection 10 of 74, that is 5 years, where proceedings are initiated by way of issuance of a show cause notice. So that period needs to be excluded. वो period आपका exclude कर दिया जाएगा for the purpose of calculation of that this specified period of 5 years or 3 years.
Next question, sir. Next question is installment not available for self-assessed tax. Then what can be the instant in which installment can be granted? First question, whether it might be differential amount between the executed tax by the officer and the self-assessed tax by the taxpayer, and interest and fine.
See, first question, which is pertaining to the installment not available for self-assessed tax, then what can be the instances in which installment can be granted? See, self-assessed tax में अगर आपने रिटर्न्स में दिखा दिया, ऐसा लॉ बोल रहा है कि अगर आपने रिटर्न्स में दिखा दिया, सेक्शन 39 में जो आप रिटर्न्स भर रहे हैं उसके अंदर अगर आपने लायबिलिटीज में दिखा दिया तो आपको इंस्टॉलमेंट नहीं दिया जाएगा. दैट इज द रिस्ट्रिक्शन अंडर सेक्शन 80. And then further you are asking whether it might be differential amount between the adjudicated tax by the officer and the self-assessed tax by the taxpayer and the interest and fine. Yes, certainly वो तो हो ही जाएगा. जो भी आपका डिफरेंशियल अमाउंट निकल रहा है, लेट्स से आपने 1 करोड़ का लायबिलिटी दिखाया हुआ है और आपका जब कोई सर्च हुआ या कोई भी एक्शन हुआ या फ्यूचर में आपको पता चला कि आपकी एडिशनल लायबिलिटी 50 लाख की और थी, तो फॉर दैट 50 lakhs the provision of section 80 is always open. But whether for that 1 crore also you can opt for that, section restricts, but I as a student of law believe that yes, you can show the merits, you can show the reason why the installment should be given, even if it was self-assessed, that at least honestly you have declared your liability, but because of certain reasons, or because maybe the collections are not happening, or because of some other reasons which are the genuine reasons, you could not pay that. So I believe even the installments, although it is not written in section 80, but I personally believe that even in those cases the installment can be granted.
Next question, where a demand is determined after execution, whether date issue of demand notice will be treated as date on which amount due to him or on date of receipt of such notice.
Again, I'm not able to understand the question. Let me presume that it is being said that once a demand notice is issued after the adjudication, so what will be the date, whether date of issuance of demand notice will be treated as date on which amount is due or the date of receipt of such notice. So I would say the when I read the provisions, you are quoting section 81. I don't think there is, just a minute. Transfer of property, section 81 you have quoted, which is not the correct case. बट मेरे को ऐसा लगता है जो आपका क्वेश्चन है वो ये है कि अगर आपका एडजुडिकेशन हो जाए और एडजुडिकेशन होने के बाद जो डिमांड नोटिस है वो निकले, तो आपको जो आगे जो 30 दिन का पीरियड जो दिया गया है कि 30 दिन में अगर आप भर देते हो 73 में तो कोई टैक्स नहीं लगेगा, 74 में अगर आप 30 दिन के अंदर भर देते हो तो आपका 50% टैक्स लगेगा। अगर एडजुडिकेशन के बाद का है तो अगर मैं वो प्रोविजन देखूं तो इट सेज just a minute, within 30 days of the communication of the order, meaning thereby once you receive the notice, so date of receipt of notice will be important. Once the demand is communicated to you, after that within 30 days you will have to pay, if that is the question.
Okay, the next question is, where party have given property on rent and he have not paid and file return related to returns and department processed and given notice, finally commissioner
Commissioner होगा.
commissioner have power to attach rented property since he do not have any other property he own.
Again the question is not very clear, but जो मुझे समझ में आ रहा है वो ये आ रहा है कि I have a property, I have given that property on rent, I am collecting rent, but I am not paying tax on that income or that receipt, and not I am filing the returns. And now the department has proceeded, and the commissioner, whether he has power to attach the rented property or not, because I do not have any other property. See, even if I have any other property or not, that will not make any difference. First and foremost, you need to understand when section 83 can be invoked. Section 83 can be invoked when there is a proceeding which is pending between or under certain sections. The sections are specified in that particular section 83. So if the proceedings are pending under any of those sections and the officer and the commissioner has reason to believe or is of the opinion that you will run away or the collection will become difficult later on, then in that case he can proceed for provisional attachment. Otherwise the provisional attachment cannot be the first recourse. And let us assume कि उसने ये मान लिया कि भाई आपसे पैसा नहीं आएगा या आपसे टैक्स का कलेक्शन नहीं होगा and therefore your property should be attached, then certainly yes, he has the power to attach your rented property. That means the property which is owned by you and rented to some other person, that property can be attached. It is a provisional attachment, and therefore they are not going to throw you out or throw the tenants out of that property. It is merely a provisional attachment which is done on a provisional basis, and once you pay the taxes or clear all the things, the provisional attachment can be lifted. So that is not an issue. But yes, that property which you have given on rent can certainly be attached. If this is a question, then this is my view.
Okay, now the next question is regarding the zero rated supply. The software person has exported a software to USA on 25/3/2020 as supply meant for export on payment of IGST without recovering IGST from US client as it is zero rated. IC number is available, but in non-STPI registration mandatory. Amount received in foreign currency in April 2020. Can he pay IGST in May 2020 with interest and then apply for refund of IGST?
I think he can. I don't find any problem into this. So I think he can pay in May along with interest, and then he can apply for the refund. I don't find any problem into this.
Okay. And next, regarding apportion of credit and block credits, is ITC on LFR charges on petroleum products eligible ITC?
What is LFR? I don't understand what is LFR charges. ITC on LFR charges on petroleum products eligible ITC. The queryster is requested to kindly clarify what is LFR charges, when it is imposed, because I'm not aware of LFR charges and when it is, in what circumstance it is imposed. So unless I am aware, I will not be in a position to answer this. I'm sorry.
Okay, next question. This is again zero rated supply. It is mentioned under the act that all tax purposes SEZ would be considered to be a place outside India. So if supplier in SEZ is supplying to another person in SEZ, will that supply attract GST since it's supplied by a person in place outside India to another person outside India? Would such supply be considered as export or import for respective parties if GST is leviable?
As per my understanding, in this circumstance, wherever an SEZ unit is transferring or is supplying certain goods to the same SEZ unit, there will be no question of any taxability. So the tax will not arise in this case, and it will neither be treated as export or import. So मेरे हिसाब से इस पे कोई भी tax नहीं लगेगा, and it will not be a zero rated supply.
Okay. Next question is regarding liability of partners of firm to pay tax. Sir, where section 90 will apply on LLP, AOP, JV, associates also. Request you to please clarify.
Let me just go through the provision. It is for the partners of the firm to pay tax. So the question I think you are asking is whether the partners of LLP, AOP or joint venture are also covered into this provision, whether the liability can rise to them also. I would say, and as per my belief, the answer is yes, because LLP is included. LLP is included in the term firm, and therefore उसकी तो liability confirm आएगी ही आएगी. So as per me, yes, LLP will certainly be included.
Okay. Whether the minor on attending the age of major will be liable for the act of guardian, as in section guardian is held liable and it is silent on features aspects of minor.
Whether the minor attaining the age of major will be liable for the act of guardian? No. I don't think that he will be liable for any act of guardian. It is a situation wherein the liability of guardian or trustees is arising in certain cases. Otherwise, there is no question of having any liability casted on minor becoming major because of any activity of the guardian. So I don't think it will be applicable.
Okay. The next question is regarding section 90, liability of partners of firm to pay tax. Partners received from a partnership firms. Partner retired from a partnership firm. Amendment was done in the portal. Still, we have to give a written intimation to the commissioner as advised in section 90 of the Act.
I would recommend that yes, you should give a written letter also, a written intimation or the communication also to the commissioner, and you should intimate that the changes has taken place, although it is amended in the system. Because at times what happens that even though you are taking the amendments, but still the record is not getting updated. It is getting updated. आपको online तो दिखेगा, लेकिन आपके offline में उनके पास जो records रहेगा उसमें पुराना ही data रहता है. So don't take any risk. It is merely a submission of a letter. So therefore, I would request that you should submit a letter. And when I refer to section 90, it says he or the firm shall intimate the date of retirement. So it is not said that the intimation shall be electronically. So I would request that you should submit an intimation.
Okay. Next question. So as per section 93 subsection 3, every person who was a partner shall jointly and severally be liable to pay the liability. Does it mean that all partners, including past partners, that is retired partners or legal heir of the dead partners, were also liable for the said dues? Request you to please give your expert view. Thank you.
See, I would simply submit in this place that you will have to ascertain, you will have to understand the liability pertains to which period. If the liability pertains to a period for which there were four partners, and out of those four, two have retired and two have joined new, so all those partners who were there for within the period in which the liability or for which the liability arises, so I am of the belief that yes, in that case the joint liability will arise. So अगर आपके आज let's say आपका retirement हो रहा है और liability आज तक की है, then in that case you are certainly liable. But अगर आज retire आप हो गए और आज के बाद की period की liability है, then you will not be liable. So it depends, and you will have to what I can say, substantiate, you will have to prove that you were not involved, or this was made without your knowledge, this liability has arose without your knowledge, or you were not the partner at that point in time where the or for which the liability is related to. So you'll have to establish that, and then you are safe. Otherwise, I am afraid your liability will be there.
Okay. So next question, sir, how to justify the fact that our case falls under section 73 and not under section 73? Because department will always try to give SCN under section 74.
I agree with you. I fully agree with you, because that was happening in the prior regime also, and that is bound to happen in the current regime also. Because आपसे 1 रुपए की गलती भी अगर हो गई, जानबूझ के हुई या नहीं हुई, लेकिन डिपार्टमेंट तो यही मानेगा कि आपने जानबूझ के की, एंड इट वाज फॉर द पर्पस of evasion of tax. So it becomes very difficult to establish that you have not committed any mistake. But this way, or this may happen only till the stage of adjudication. आप अपील्स लेवल पे जब जाते हैं या जब सेकंड अपील लेवल पे जाते हैं, then you need to establish that this was the facts and circumstances of the case, and this is how the term suppression or fraud is defined. Suppression ये बोलता है, fraud ये का meaning ये होता है, या willful misstatement का meaning ये होता है, I'm not getting covered under any of the circumstances. Let us presume कि आपके केस में the allegation is that you have classified yourself wrongly. In spite of paying 18%, you are paying 5%. So you have classified yourself wrongly. So in that case, you can establish that there were bona fide reasons to believe that this was 5%. और अगर आप वो कर पाएंगे, then you will be under 73. You can substantiate and safeguard yourself. और इसीलिए आप ध्यान रखें कि वहाँ पे एक प्रोविजन भी दिया है सेक्शन 75 में कि if it is found out कि जो extended period इन्वोक किया है, या जो allegation आपके ऊपर fraud का लगाया या suppression का लगाया है, if it is found at a later point in time that this is wrong, then in that case they can reduce the period to 3 years. तो 74 के से हटा के 73 में आपका assessment ले जाएंगे. तो certainly I would agree with your point that it is very difficult for us to prove to the department that 73 लगाइए, 74 मत लगाइए. There was no such intention, but it is not nothing to worry. ठीक है, थोड़ा सा cost बढ़ेगा, थोड़ा litigation बढ़ेगा, but certainly if it is a genuine issue, then you will be getting the relief either from the first appellate authority or the second appellate authority. This is what I can submit as this point in time. But yes, I can very strongly say that I agree with your point that department is anyways going to issue a notice under section 74.
Okay. The
It's
next
a
question.
same question. It's a same question.
Same question. Same question.
Whether the amendment, yes. Moving it.
Okay. If matter moved to AAR due to no decision by AAR due to conflict in AAR, does does applicant need to pay 10K fees?
See, probably the provision is silent on this, and logically also, now since the matter is referred to the AAR or the appellate authority for advance rulings by the department itself or by the uh, authority for advance ruling itself, so there shall not be any liability to pay 10,000 rupees fees. And even if I read the provision, then the provision also does not provide for any such payment of fees. Let me just see the provision, because this is a good question. I've never thought of such kind of question. Appeal, yeah, appeal to appellate authority. It's saying every appeal under this section shall be in such form. And what does they provide for under section 98, जहाँ पे वो उनको दे रहा था, उनको ये बोल रहा है where the member of the authority differs on any question on which the advance ruling is sought, they can state the point or points on which they differ and make a reference to the appellate authority for hearing and decision on such question. I would say that this is not an appeal which is practically being filed by the aggrieved party, that is the taxpayer or the departmental authorities, and therefore the liability to make payment of 10,000 rupees or whatever fees is prescribed will not come on the hands of the taxpayer. Yes.
Next question. Provision relating to the orders of AAR and AAR refer to copies of order being to concerned officer as well as jurisdiction officer. What is the difference between two?
Just a minute. Let me refer. Okay. You are talking about subsection 4. It says a copy of the advance ruling pronounced by the appellate authority, duly signed by the members and certified in such manner as may be prescribed, shall be sent to the applicant, concerned officer, jurisdictional officer, and to the authority after such pronouncement. Now, what I feel is that jurisdictional officer is the officer who or under whose jurisdiction you are falling. Concerned officer can be person who has initiated some action against you. So that action may not be a proceeding pending, because यहाँ पे एक वो भी restriction है that there should not be any proceeding pending against the person for approaching the high court, the advance ruling authority. There is that condition, but I believe कि concerned officer यहाँ पे यही होगा, जो officer इस particular question को deal कर रहा है. He is the officer who is the concerned officer who is explaining this the entire things to the एडवांस रूलिंग अथॉरिटी, जो आपके जो डिपार्टमेंट के बिहाफ पे सारी चीजें एक्सप्लेन कर रहा है. ही इज द कंसर्न्ड ऑफिसर एंड द जुरिसडिक्शनल ऑफिसर ऑब्वियसली जिसके जुरिसडिक्शन में आप फॉल करते हैं, एंड द अथॉरिटी ऑफ एडवांस रूलिंग. सो दिस इज द डिफरेंस व्हिच आई फील.
Okay. Yeah. Next question. A person liable to deduct tax at source under section 51 has to compulsorily get registered only as a deductor or also as a normal taxpayer. What if they supply only exempted goods or services? Do they still need to get the registered both as a deductor as well as the normal taxpayer?
See, when you yourself are saying that when they are supplying only exempted goods or services, then there is no question of any registration. I don't think there is any question of any registration, because even when I refer section 51, it will not be applicable in case where the goods are 100% supplied which are exempt, because it says to deduct tax at the rate of 1% from the payment made or credited to the supplier of the taxable goods or services or both. So अगर आप taxable कोई supply कर ही नहीं रहे हैं, so there is no question of any liability, there is no question of section 51, and therefore no need to take any registration. आप section 23 में cover हो जाएंगे and you will be out of the registration process.
Okay, next. Capital assets purchased in VAT era, that is set up availed, dispose of in GST era without consideration whether schedule 1 will be applicable for levy of GST.
To my understanding, no. रीजन बीइंग, जब आप शेड्यूल 1 देखते हैं, शेड्यूल 1 का पार्ट 1 जो है वो ये बोलता है अलाइनेशन और डिस्पोजिशन ऑफ कैपिटल एसेट ऑन विच इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट इज अवेल्ड. नाउ please appreciate friends that input tax credit is defined in this law, which is credit of input tax, and input tax is again defined in this law, which includes the CGST, IGST and the RCM and all those taxes which are paid under this particular act or the IGST act. And therefore ये जो आप बात कर रहे हैं वो वैट एरा का था, और वैट एरा में आपने सेट ऑफ लिया है या क्रेडिट लिया है which is nowhere related to the input tax credit, and therefore अगर आप विदाउट कंसिडरेशन उसको बेच रहे हैं तो आपका कोई भी लायबिलिटी शेड्यूल 1 में नहीं आएगा. दिस इज व्हाट आई बिलीव. यस.
Okay. Sir, if I am purchasing a commercial office in any market building for my business purpose before completion certificate is obtained by the builder, and if this builder charges GST to me, then will I be able to take credit of that GST paid? And if not, then does that constitute that I am having a works contract service done from the builder and therefore that GST is blocked?
See, first and foremost, you need to appreciate that there are two entries in section 17.5 clause C and clause D. Section 17.5 clause C provides for the works contract and clause D provides for the construction. So when I am indulging into any construction activity, either for my own purpose, then also you are not in a position to take the credit. Now you are saying that you are purchasing a commercial office in any market building before the completion certificate. So in that case, it becomes a service which is being rendered and expressly made taxable under the GST law. As per schedule 2, it becomes a supply of service. So for the person who is a developer, for him it is a supply of service, but for you it falls into the construction input service, and therefore you will be covered into 17.5 clause C और लेट्स से अगर आप ये बोलते हैं कि आपका लैंड का रजिस्ट्रेशन अलग हो रहा है और इसके अंदर आप केवल वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट की सर्विसेज ले रहे हो, then in that case you will fall into C, because C is also applicable only in respect of construction. Please read that provision. Clause C भी यही बोलता है, works contract in relation to construction. So you will fall in 17.5C or you will fall in 17.5D in both the cases, irrespective of, because आपका क्वेश्चन ऐसा था तो इसलिए मैंने दोनों को इंक्लूड करके आंसर दिया है कि irrespective of the fact whether you are falling in 75C as a works contract or 17.5D as a construction, it is blocked specifically. 17.5C में तो उन्होंने ये बोला works contract service for the purpose of construction if provided as an outward supply तो मिलेगा, नहीं तो नहीं मिलेगा. तो अगर आप इनवर्ड ले रहे हो और आउटवर्ड नहीं दे रहे हो तो इट इज ब्लॉक्ड. कंस्ट्रक्शन में उन्होंने ऐसा बोला कि इवन इफ इट इज फॉर ओन पर्पस विच इज टू बी बिजनेस पर्पस, विच इज फॉर द बिजनेस पर्पस, लेट्स से आपने कमर्शियल ऑफिस लिया, किसी ने फैक्ट्री बनाया, so that is also blocked. So in both the cases it will be blocked and you will not be allowed to get the credit.
Okay, next. Whether we should pay RCM under the rent a cab service if we avail a rent a cab service from unregistered service provider to the corporate. Whether we should pay under RCM for service received from unregistered service provider as well, please clarify.
I'm not getting this question. Like, लेकिन मैं इतना जरूर बोल सकता हूँ, पहली चीज कि अगर आप आरसीएम की कोई भी सर्विसेज ले रहे हैं, सॉरी रेंट कैब की कोई भी सर्विसेज ले रहे हैं, तो आई थिंक इट इज इंक्लूडेड इन आरसीएम. ऑल्दो आई एम नॉट श्योर बिकॉज दिस इज अ कंप्लायंस बेस्ड क्वेश्चन और थोड़ा सा इसके लिए मुझे रेफरेंस करना पड़ेगा. आई नीड टू रेफर द पर्टिकुलर टैरिफ, द पर्टिकुलर नोटिफिकेशन. So far as my knowledge and whatever I have read earlier is concerned, I think RCM is applicable on rent a cab and you will be liable to pay the RCM even if you are receiving the services from an unregistered service provider. So that is my view, but still I will have to check it once and then I can get back to you. But मुझे apparently ये लगता है कि RCM की liability तो है ही, और अगर है तो फिर वो इससे भी अगर आप unregistered service provider से ले रहे हैं तो भी लगेगा. But still I would check and I will get back to you. Yes.
Okay.
Next
query, sir. A school and college have a huge land and building. In the building, a bank is situated and rent is being paid to school by a bank. School is also paying GST on rent. School also provides the accommodation of a few employees and also charge a rent, and GST is also being paid on IT. Whether school is liable to pay the GST on accommodation provided to employee. But in return 3B, only rent taxable figure is reported. Exempted receipt such as fees from students etc. are not reported. It is mandatory to report exempted receipt.
I think the question is, there are two questions. One is whether a school is liable to pay GST on accommodation provided to employee, and second is that the school fees which is being collected from students, which is an exempted school fees, whether it is mandatory to report the exempted receipts. Now, so far as first question is concerned, to my belief, yes, but there is an exception which is provided. I think 1,000 rupees की 1,000 rupees से ऊपर होगा तो ये GST नहीं लगेगा, नीचे होगा तो GST नहीं लगेगा, ऊपर होगा तो लगेगा. So accordingly you will have to see. If you are charging from for the accommodation to the employees, then the liability will certainly come. And on the other question, I would say that yes, if it is an exempted supply, then in that case you need to show this in the returns. It is mandatory. Yes, certainly it is mandatory as per my view that you should show that, irrespective of the fact that it is not going to have any revenue implication, but still I would recommend that you should show that in the GSTR 3B.
Next question, sir. If any proprietor death happen and his business is taken over by his son in personal or in HUF category, then also section support or not, or refund of lying ITC has to be claimed?
Again, the question is not clear, but जो मेरे को समझ में आ रहा है वो ये है कि proprietor is expiring and then thereafter the business is being continued by his son. So there is a provision which we have read, section 18 subsection 3, जहाँ पे बोला है कि whatever credit is lying can be transferred by way of filing a ITC 02 form. तो जो भी आपके पास क्रेडिट उस दिन अवेलेबल था, जिस दिन एक्सपायरी हुआ, तो उनके सन के अकाउंट में, यानी उनको रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा और ये सारा क्रेडिट वो इस फॉर्म के थ्रू ट्रांसफर कर सकते हैं अपने इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर में, यानी नए इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर में दोनों का पैन क्योंकि अलग होगा. एंड नाउ व्हेन इट इज सेड कि रिफंड मिलेगा क्या वो आईटीसी का, आई वुड से only the refund of ITC is possible in two situations, only in two situations. One, zero rated supply. Two, inverted duty. So if it is zero rated, then the refund application can certainly be processed. If it is an inverted duty, then also it can be processed. But if it is merely accumulated credit, not on account of zero rated supplies or not on account of inverted duty, then in that case, I'm afraid only the ITC balance can be transferred to the newly constituted firm or HUF. Rest, nothing can happen. The refund cannot be granted.
Next, if a person becomes liable to register on 1st September 2020, so within 20 days, that is till 30th October 2020, he has to apply for registration. My query is whether he should charge GST on sales occurred during this 30 days period.
No. If you are liable for registration, see, you might have read section 31 subsection 3 also, wherein it is said कि जब आप अप्लाई करते हैं और जब आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन मिलता है, उसमें कोई डेट्स होता है, जबकि डेट जब इफेक्टिव होता है और जब आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन सर्टिफिकेट मिलता है, इसके ड्यूरेशन में तो आप वो लिखते हैं, जो फॉर्म होता है, सो फॉर आई रिमेंबर, आई हैव सीन दैट फॉर्म, दैट यू नीड टू राइट फ्रॉम विच डेट यू आर मेड लायबल. दैट मीन्स कि ये डेट आपको इफेक्टिव डेट चाहिए. और ये प्रोविजन भी है सेक्शन 17 में, सेक्शन 18 में भी लिखा है कि अगर आप विद इन 30 डेज आप अप्लाई कर देते हैं तो आपको वही डेट मिलती है जिस दिन आप लायबल हो जाते हो, और अगर आप 30 दिन के बाद करते हो तो वो दिन मिलती है जिस दिन आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन मिलता है. तो लेट मी कम बैक टू दिस क्वेश्चन. लेट से आप 1 तारीख, आपने थोड़ा सा यहाँ पे मिस्टेक किया, 30 सितंबर होना चाहिए था, तो 1 सितंबर को लेट से आपकी लायबिलिटी अराइज हुई, आप 30 सितंबर से पहले आप फाइल कर देते हो, तो उस फॉर्म में आप लिखोगे कि आपकी एलिजिबिलिटी आई थी 1 सितंबर 2020 से. अगर 1 सितंबर 2020 से आपकी एलिजिबिलिटी आई थी और रजिस्ट्रेशन का इफेक्टिव डेट 1 सितंबर 2020 होता है, देन यू विल हैव टू इशू अ नोटिस, इशू अ इनवॉइस विद द जीएसटी. सो देयरफॉर इट इज सेड कि इस बीच में जो भी सप्लाईज हुआ था उसका आप रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस भी इशू करना पड़ेगा विद इन 30 डेज. दैट इज द प्रोविजन इन सेक्शन 31 सबसेक्शन 3 क्लॉज ए. तो वो आप प्रोविजन को दोनों को कांटेक्ट करें, दोनों को कोऑर्डिनेट करेंगे आपस में और साथ में कोरिलेट करेंगे, देन यू विल गेट योर आंसर दैट यस, अगर आपने जिस दिन मैं वापस से बोलता हूँ, 1 सितंबर को आपकी एलिजिबिलिटी हुई, आपने 15 को फिल किया, 17 तारीख को आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन मिल गया, द डेट ऑफ रजिस्ट्रेशन इज 17 बट द इफेक्टिव डेट इज 1 सितंबर. सो 1 सितंबर से चूंकि इफेक्टिव हो गया, 1 सितंबर से 17 के बीच में जितने भी आपने सप्लाईज किए उसके आपको रिवाइज्ड इनवॉइस इशू करने पड़ेंगे और उसके हिसाब से आपको जो भी ड्यूटी है वो डिस्चार्ज करनी पड़ेगी. दैट विल बी शोन एज अ फर्स्ट रिटर्न व्हिच हैज टू बी फाइल्ड एंड द कंप्लायंस हैज टू बी डन. अमित भाई, यू आर आल्सो कंप्लायंस पर्सन, तो जो मैं बोल रहा हूँ, अगर कंप्लायंस के क्वेश्चन में कुछ आपको ऐड करना होगा, यू कैन ऐड दैट, बिकॉज आई एम नॉट वेरी गुड एट कंप्लायंस, आई डू नॉट नो एनीथिंग अबाउट कंप्लायंस.
Sure, sir. Next question.
Yes.
Sir, is the restriction of section 18 subclause 2 is for capital goods as well? Means ITC of capital goods acquired more than 1 year would not be available.
See, what does it say? It says registered person shall not be entitled to take input tax credit under subsection 1. What is subsection 1? Subsection 1 provides for the credits, correct? Including the capital goods credit, and over and above this, when I am referring the term input tax credit, it includes the capital goods credit also. केवल इसमें इनपुट या इनपुट सर्विसेज का क्रेडिट नहीं आता, कैपिटल का भी आता है. तो एज पर माय बिलीफ, यस, the it will include capital goods also.
Next,
Yes.
a trader registered under existing act opts for composition levy on commencement of GST Act. I don't find any question here.
ठीक है, let us move on.
Yes. Next question relating to ISD credit. What would happen to SGST credit with respect to common services?
Same section 20 of the SGST will be applicable, and it will be also be distributed.
Next question.
See,
A
it's a
builder,
fungible thing. It's a fungible thing. There is no difference of ये तो इन्होंने artificial difference बना दिया SGST और CGST में, but practically or logic wise या फिर law wise there is no difference. It is one and the same thing. Just the difference is वो state kitty में जाता है या central kitty में आता है. So same provision which is there in the state law, in the central law, is there in the state law also. Yeah.
next
Again,
question.
I think there is no question.
No question is there.
A builder is opt under composition tax to be paid. 5% tax to be paid. I think there is no composition for builders now under GST.
Yes.
There is an outward liability of 5% after that notification 3/2019 from 1st April 2019. Otherwise तो मेरे ख्याल से उसमें कुछ ये सब 5% या कंपोजिशन कोई ऑप्शन ही नहीं है. तो शायद इनका क्वेश्चन यही है कि क्या वो ऑप्शन पे जा सकता है कंपोजिशन में. तो आई बिलीव देयर इज नो such provision under GST law wherein he can go for the composition levy. But अभी जो services में they have introduced for till the turnover of 50 lakhs, उसमें अगर आप fall होते हो then you can go there. Otherwise you cannot.
Next, gift given to employee or dealer by company for target achievement can be considered while taking ITC on those goods.
See, gift given to employee or dealer by company for target achievement. So it means that the gift is not a gift. It is under an obligation. You have rested a condition. You have posed a condition wherein you have said कि अगर आप ये करोगे तो मैं आपको ये दूंगा. अगर आप ये नहीं करोगे तो आपको ये नहीं मिलेगा. So when it is conditional, तो I am of a belief कि मेरे ख्याल से आपको ITC मिलना चाहिए, because that may be for the purpose of promotion of your business, wherein you are motivating an employee to work harder and sell more, and you are motivating the dealer to work harder and sell more, and therefore it is in course or furtherance of business. और again, since it is not a voluntary thing, ऐसा नहीं है कि आपने सबको ऐसे ही दे दिया. Only जो condition satisfy करेगा उसको ही आप देने वाले हैं. तो 100% I am of the view that you are eligible for the credit.
Sir, I think we have covered all these questions last week with Ashu sir. We must move forward from slide 50. These
Is
all
it,
questions are done. Yes, sir. These all are the repeated questions.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Anyways, I don't think that we have touched upon these questions.
Because last question, that Siemens, there was a question of Siemens case law also that Asus has covered.
Correct. So you mean to say
From slide number
अभी
50.
जो मैंने questions के answer दिया है, I think I've never
That was
answered
also, I think Asus has answered last time.
Okay, that may be a case.
Okay, we'll start from here. Then this way also covered.
This one?
We can start from here, sir.
Okay.
Sir, is it possible for CG to issue notification without recommendation of council recommendation? In case yes, will that notification be valid?
I don't think they can issue any notification without the recommendation of council, because council is a constitutional body, Article 279A, and therefore anything and everything that has to be done with the permission and with the recommendation of the council. So no notification, as per my view, can be issued without the recommendation of the council.
Next, can a person having 3 branches in a single state, for example, having branches in Surat, Rajkot, and Baroda, apply for single registration in respect of Surat and Rajkot, and different application for Baroda?
Yes, he can do that, because now the law is amended. Earlier this provision was not there. It was only available in the concept of or for the for those persons who are having a separate business vertical. But now that term business vertical is deleted, and even a branch can get separate registration within a state. So now it is possible you can get separate registration for Baroda and single registration for Surat and Rajkot. It is possible.
Next, when goods supplied by a third person to recipient and invoice is generated by supplier to recipient, in this case, the GSTIN of third person is required to be mentioned on invoice or not.
What is the question? Like, goods are supplied by the third person to the recipient, and the invoice is generated by the supplier to recipient. Then in this case, GSTN of the third person is required to be mentioned on the invoice or not? No, there is no need to mention the GSTN of the third person. Why it is required? Because it is bill to ship to transaction. मैंने आपको बोला, आपने उनको माल मिस्टर एक्स को सप्लाई कर दिया और मैंने मिस्टर एक्स को इनवॉइस जनरेट कर दिया, तो आई विल जस्ट mention my GST number and the GST number of the recipient. So third person's GST number is not required.
Next question: if companies has its registered office as per ROC in Delhi and whole business is in UP, then does he require to take registration at both places?
Has registered office as per ROC in Delhi and whole business in UP. See, if you go through the provision of section 22, section 22 says the state from where you are making the outward supply, taxable outward supply, in that state you need to take registration. So you have the office at as per ROC in Delhi, but you are not making any outward supplies from Delhi, wherein you have an office at UP also, and from there you are making the all the supplies. So I would recommend that you should take registration in UP, and the registration as at ROC or register at Delhi shall not be required, because you are not making any outward supplies from that particular place. But in case, since it is a registered office, and in case you are maintaining any books or documents, then the place of business is defined in this law, that the place where the books or the accounts are mentioned maintained, that place will also be a place of supply. So in that case, you can get that office which is shown in ROC as a registered office as your additional place of business, and take and get it mentioned on in the certificate. तो वो आप कर सकते हैं. Otherwise registration is not required. If the accounts is not maintained, or if there is only no relation, then in that case no registration is required for the office which is only for the books of ROC or for the purpose of ROC.
Next, whether the registration is compulsory in case the person is required to pay tax under RCM, whereas his whole supply is otherwise exempt. For example, the case of books publisher.
I've already answered this. I've just answered this, the similar question. If it is the entire thing which is exempt, then there is no question of registration under GST law. The similar question is answered, no? So I'm not repeating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Company placed a scheme that if dealer purchases the goods so much of quantity in a certain period, then company will allow the dealer for a foreign trip. The expenses incurred on this trip will be borne by the company. The question is company is eligible for ITC for this expense? Will it be treated a furtherance of business?
This also we have covered. This also we have covered recently, wherein we have discussed कि अगर कोई ऐसा टारगेट अचीवमेंट पे अगर कोई भी चीजें रहती हैं तो क्या उसको क्रेडिट मिलेगा. मेरे हिसाब से टारगेट अचीवमेंट से ये डायरेक्टली लिंक्ड है. सो एज पर मी द क्रेडिट विल बी अलाउड.
Next, air ticket purchased in March 20. Date of travel is 15th June 20. Can ITC be claimed only in June 20 as services will be actually utilized only in June 20?
To my understanding, yes. I'm moving ahead, not discussing anything else about it. Yeah.
Next question. If taxable person provides service of both taxable as well as exempt service, then reversal of the credit is from common credit or exempt service only. He is maintaining the different books for taxable and exempt service. Please guide on this.
See, if he's maintaining different books, then you can directly identify which are the services which are only for taxable, which are the services or goods which are only for exempt. So in that there is no question of any reversal, but there might be some common credits. So in that common credit, the question will arise for the reversal. So you can do the reversal as per the procedure which is laid down in rule 42 and 43, you can do the reversal in the proportion of taxable vis-a-vis exempt supplies. अदरवाइज जो डायरेक्टली एट्रीब्यूटेबल है उनको आपको करने की जरूरत नहीं है.
Next, where a registered person transports certain goods for exhibition and succeed is selling those goods during the exhibition, what is the liability of such RP, that is registered person?
Now see, when he has taken certain goods, he is transporting certain goods. Maybe अगर वो same state में है जहाँ पे वो registered है, तब तो कोई issue है ही नहीं. तब तो you will have to issue an invoice. So at the time of sale of those goods in the exhibition, you might have issued the invoice or the delivery challan. So you issue the invoice and pay the taxes accordingly. But in case the goods are transported to some other states, then the question will arise whether you need to take registration as a casual taxable person in that state or not, because you are making supply from that state. So whether a casual taxable person registration is required or not. So I would recommend that you can get a temporary registration as a casual taxable person, which is for a limited period of 90 days. You can take that registration, and once the goods are sold on at the time of exhibition, you can pay the taxes and come back. If at all you don't want to go for that option of casual taxable person registration, then you will have to prove that the goods were taken for exhibition. You have not sold the goods in during the course of exhibition. You have simply taken that for sampling or goods sent on approval. Take those goods, and at the time of sale of those goods, this is a circular also which is given by the government. At the time of sale of those goods in the exhibition, you can raise the invoice from the place where you are registered. So that is also allowed. So any option you can exercise.
Next, whether an opportunity of being heard means physical hearing or online through submission on portal or through mail, or both, or at the discretion of the officer or at the request of the person.
See, I don't want to comment on this, but to be very honest, I personally believe that opportunity of being heard can be by way of any mode. It has to be the appropriate and the convenient mode for both. अब आपको वो आपका ऑफिसर बोल रहा है कि आप एक काम करिए, आप कल आप आ जाइए, जबकि आपके शहर में कर्फ्यू लगा है, तो फिजिकल हियरिंग विल नॉट बी होल्डिंग गुड. एट द सेम टाइम वो आपको एक मेल भेज देता है, बोलता है इस लिंक पे क्लिक करके आप पर्सनल हियरिंग कर लीजिए, वेर इन यू डू नॉट हैव द इंटरनेट सिस्टम एट योर प्रेमिसेस. So it is not comfortable, but the opportunity has been given. Opportunity has been given, and it becomes sufficient for him to prove that I have given the opportunity. I have asked him to come online, but he could not come, or he has not come. So as and when you receive a notice for opportunity of being heard or for show cause, you should reply back that whether you want to get yourself heard personally, or you will be submitting a particular reply, and on the basis of that the person should proceed. It is an opportunity of being heard, meaning thereby you are given an opportunity for explaining your defense points or your points. So that points can be written. आप रिटर्न में एक रिप्लाई भेज दीजिए और बोल दीजिए कि आप ऑर्डर दे दीजिए. आप फिजिकली वहां पे प्रेजेंट रहेंगे, ऐसा आप बोल दीजिए. आप ऑनलाइन प्रेजेंट रहेंगे, आप ऐसा बोलेंगे. तो इन एनी मोड इट कैन बी गिवन. So it depends on the convenience of both. I would not say it depends only on the convenience of the officer or the discretion of the officer. It depends on convenience of the both. If you are not comfortable, then you will have to write that, send that in writing, that this is what I'm comfortable and this is I'm not comfortable. So I think the opportunity of being heard is just a notice which is being sent to you, and then the ball is thrown at your court, and now you need to reply back. You cannot sit back and expect कि ऑफिसर ही आपको बार बार अपॉर्चुनिटीज देगा. वो नोटिस आ गया शोकोस, उसके बाद अब आपकी ड्यूटी है कि आप उसकी रिप्लाई करें. उसमें लिखें कि भाई मैं चाहता हूं कि मुझे आप पर्सनली बुलाएं और इसको मुझे पर्सनली मेरे पॉइंट्स को सुने. देन ही विल गिव अ पर्सनल अपॉर्चुनिटी.
If a person has applied for cancellation of registration in January 2018 and till date the cancellation request has not been considered, what's the remedy?
See, I'm not sure about this provision, but मेरे ख्याल से 1 फरवरी 2019 से there is an amendment that suspension of registration provision has come into place, wherein now they are saying that as soon as you will apply for cancellation, your registration will get suspended. और उसके बाद जब फाइनल ऑर्डर कैंसिलेशन का आएगा, उसके बाद आपका सस्पेंशन जो है फाइनल ऑर्डर में कन्वर्ट हो जाएगा. सस्पेंशन से ये फायदा होगा that you will not be in a position or you will not be required to file the returns. But in your case, I'm afraid you will be liable for filing the returns because the registration is still to be cancelled. So only remedy is you approach the officer, proper officer, approach him time and again and ask him that this registration should be cancelled. Convince him that the business is closed or whatever the reason for which you are cancelling the registration. And if at all he is not cancelling, then I'm afraid you will have to keep on filing the returns. तो आप पहले वो कर दीजिए. तो मेरे ख्याल से सस्पेंशन का जो प्रोविजन है, यू टेक द शेल्टर ऑफ दैट, गेट योर रजिस्ट्रेशन सस्पेंडेड सो दैट उसके बाद वो कैंसिल करें नहीं करें, you can at least you can be at peace. So this will be my submission. Amit, this is a compliance question. If you want to add something, you please add.
Sir, it's complete, sir. Same process to be followed.
Okay. Yeah, next question.
Next question. If the client has been granted cancellation of registration and there is amount outstanding in credit of electronic credit ledger, would that amount be eligible for refund?
No.
Next question. My query is regarding 180 days reversal to be made if payment of the bill is not made.
What is the query?
There is no such query. We must move forward.
अगर ये जानना चाहते हैं कि प्रोसीजर क्या है तो या प्रोविजन क्या है, तो प्रोविजन इज सिंपल कि जो डेट ऑफ इनवॉइस है उससे 180 दिन में आपको पेमेंट करना है. अगर आप नहीं करते हैं तो आपने जो क्रेडिट लिया होगा उसको आपको रिवर्स करना है अलॉन्ग विद इंटरेस्ट. दैट इज द प्रोविजन. बट अगर आप लीगली पूछें तो ये प्रोविजन उन्होंने लॉ में लेके आए हैं, लेकिन इस प्रोविजन को कैसे इन्फोर्स करना है या क्या उसकी मैकेनिज्म है वो अभी तक प्रोवाइड नहीं की गई, क्योंकि रूल 37 जो है इट सेज कि इट शैल बी रिवर्स बाय वे ऑफ एडिंग टू योर आउटपुट लायबिलिटी इन जीएसटीआर 2. जीएसटीआर 2 इज स्टिल नॉट देयर, तो आप वो कर ही नहीं सकते हो. तो इसलिए अगर आप इसको अभी नहीं कंप्लाई कर रहे हो तो भी एटलीस्ट यू हैव दैट पॉइंट टू आर्ग्यू. बट सिंस द क्वेरी इज नॉट देयर, आई एम स्किपिंग इट.
Next, if the attachment of equipment is for beneficial enjoyment of the land or building, the equipment becomes immovable property itself. But if attachment is for beneficial enjoyment of equipment, then equipment remains movable property. If possible, with example.
See, the best example which directly comes to my mind is a boiler. जब आप एक कोई बॉयलर लगाते हैं तो काफ़ी उसका वेट होता है एंड काफ़ी साइज बड़ा होता है, एंड जनरली उसके नीचे आपको एक प्लिंथ, एक प्लेटफॉर्म बनाना पड़ता है, एक स्ट्रक्चर बनाना पड़ता है, उसके ऊपर आप उस बॉयलर को रखते हो. तो मैं ऐसा बोलूंगा कि इमोवेल और मूवेबल में डिफरेंशिएट करने के लिए आपको बहुत सारे ऐसे सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट्स मिलेंगे जहाँ पे बोला है इवन इट लुक्स लाइक एन इमोवेल प्रॉपर्टी. जैसे मैं बात करता हूँ टाइलिंग की, अ फ्लोरिंग ऑफ टाइल्स, वेरिन आजकल वो लिफ्टेड टाइल्स यूज होते हैं जिसमें डेटा सेंटर्स में वेरिन नीचे से सारे तार जा रहे होते हैं और उसको आप वो टाइल्स को आप निकाल सकते हो, एक नट बोल्ट पे होता है, यू कैन ओपन दैट नट and take it off. If that is a case wherein you can remove that, although it is an immovable property, it seems to be an immovable property, it will be a movable property. So there is no specific example for it. तो वो टाइल्स का जैसे मैंने एग्जांपल दिया, बॉयलर का एग्जांपल दिया कि आपने बॉयलर लगा लिया अपनी फैक्ट्री के अंदर और स्ट्रक्चर के ऊपर उसको फिक्स कर दिया, लेकिन अगर उसी बॉयलर को आप खोल सकते हो नट से और ले जा सकते हो without causing any damage, then there are Supreme Court judgments. Honorable Supreme Court has led the principle wherein it was held to be a movable property. So it depends on the facts and circumstances of the case. There cannot be a standalone or a very particular example. Let me give an example of जो आप किसी थिएटर में जाते हो तो थिएटर के अंदर पूरा वुडन कार्विंग होता है चारों तरफ से. अगर आप कोई ऑडिटोरियम में जाते हो तो इफ दैट now that is a furniture is something which is movable, but still जब वो पार्ट बन जाता है उस इमोवेबल प्रॉपर्टी का, then you cannot take it off. जो आपने फर्नीचर ऊपर लगाया है पूरा, जो आपने उसका फर्निशिंग किया है, you cannot take it off. बट अगर ऐसी सिचुएशन है कि वो बोल्ट पे लगा हुआ है और वो बोल्ट खोल के आप उसको निकाल सकते हो और दूसरी जगह एज इट इज यूज कर सकते हो, then in that case it is a movable property and therefore it will fall within the definition of movable property. और जो इमोवेबल प्रॉपर्टी यानी कंस्ट्रक्शन वाला जो आप पूछना चाहते हो उसमें से निकल जाएगा और आपके ऊपर आपको क्रेडिट मिलेगा, बट इट विल हैव टू बी प्रूव्ड बाय यू एंड दिस विल लीड टू लिटिगेशन. इट इज नॉट दैट सिंपल. So please establish that. Please be clear about the facts that yes, it is movable, then only claim the credit.
Next, if a register in Delhi and supply to West Bengal from his godown in Haryana, then will he liable to get registration in Haryana?
if I register in Delhi, ठीक है, and supply to West Bengal from his godown in Haryana, whose godown? That means the third person. So let's say I am A in Delhi, B is in Haryana, and it is selling to C in West Bengal. So who is liable to take registration? What is the question? Who is
It's
he?
not complete.
No, his godown to West Bengal from his godown in Haryana. So whose godown? Whether the godown is of that West Bengal party? If yes, if it is not a third party and a West Bengal party who is storing the goods there, then yes, I would say that the registration is required. Even if it is transferring from from Haryana to West Bengal, because that becomes a distinct person in the eyes of law, and therefore the registration is required. So still, the question is ambiguous, and therefore I will request Sanjay Bhai to please elaborate on this question, and I will be replying back. हम जब ये फाइनल कंप्लीट करेंगे, क्योंकि आज 25th 26th डे हो गया है, we only have 5 days left, one query session is still left and 4 days for IGST. उसके बाद I will try that 31st day will have a live question and answers. I am trying it out कि हम उसको YouTube पे live कर सकें, wherein all of you can interact with me and I can interact with you and we can interact live. So let us see whether we are able to do that. अगर हम वो करेंगे, then you can ask that question at that point in time also. But please elaborate on question. So we'll certainly reply and we'll prepare the compendium also and we'll be circulating that. Yes. Next question.
Next, dealer has started retail medicine business in August 2019, but till March 2020, his turnover has not exceeded 40 lakhs. Hence, he has not taken registration under GST.
I think the change in law have said that if he is involved only in supply of goods, exclusively in goods, no service, then in that case the limit is extended to 40 lakhs, isn't it? ऐसा कुछ है ना? There is an amendment of this type, na? Yes, I am reading the second proviso. Third proviso to section 22 subsection 1. It says, provided also that the government may, at the request of the state and on the recommendation of the council, enhance the aggregate turnover from 20 lakhs of such amount not exceeding 40 lakhs in case supplier who is engaged exclusively in supply of goods, subject to such conditions and limitations as may be notified. So it has been provided, the law has been amended and it has been provided clearly कि इस provision के हिसाब से तो आप 40 लाख तक का आपका टर्नओवर हो और आप केवल एक्सक्लूसिवली अगर गुड्स में ही डील करते हो तो फिर आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं लेंगे आप तो भी चलेगा. दिस वाज इंसर्टेड एंड दिस इज मेड इफेक्टिव फ्रॉम आई बिलीव फ्रॉम फाइनेंस नंबर 2 एक्ट है ये विच वाज इन जुलाई. तो ये इफेक्टिव बाद में अभी हुआ होगा शायद. सो आई विल हैव टू सी दिस बट द प्रोविजन इज देयर एंड दिस प्रोविजन इज इफेक्टिव. तो आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं लेना है अगर आप 40 लाख तक का करते हैं. लेकिन आई एम डाउटफुल कि आपको जिस स्टेट में आप है, यू विल हैव टू चेक whether that state has issued notification with respect to this provision or not, because this is a proviso wherein they are saying at the request of the state, the government may at the request of the state and on the recommendation of the council enhance the aggregate turnover to 40 lakhs. So whether the notification is there or not, you need to check this. Once the notification is there, then yes, you are correct. If not, then I'm afraid आपने ये गलती कर दी है and you will have to take you will have to pay the registration by taking you will have to take registration and pay the tax. So this is just a submission that yes, the law has been amended, but whether in your state the notification has been issued or not, you need to check that. Yes.
Next question, sir, please provide the citation of case law regarding registration of place of shared office, that is sharing basis.
आप ही बता दो ना, आपको पता होगा.
सर नाम याद नहीं है, citation याद नहीं है इसके.
Citation तो even I don't remember. It was a judgment. It was a judgment. Now it was an advance ruling. कोई कोर्ट का जजमेंट नहीं था. It was an advance ruling wherein the office was being shared for providing services जो आजकल चलता है. It was advance ruling. I also don't remember the name, but give me some time. I will certainly reply back. Kamal Bhai is the querist. So if you can have, if you have my number, you can just SMS me this question or WhatsApp me this question. I'll reply back. और जो company में रहेगा, that reply will be there for all the participants. But certainly there is an advanced ruling. और मेरे ख्याल से जब हमने discuss किया था, तो I have touched upon that advanced ruling also. But the name I am forgetting. I don't remember that name.
Next question. What can be GST implication in case of sale of goods where
Was it something Space Lancer or something like that? ऐसा कुछ नाम था?
so we'll check in. We'll check.
Yes, we'll check. ठीक है, fine. Go ahead.
What can be GST implication in case of sale of goods where parts and labor resources are sent at client site and assembled, manufactured at there? Example, PCV Windows material sent with labors at construction site and assembled and fitted at there.
What is the question? What can be GST implication? This is merely a provision of service. Now, if it is pertaining to the immovable property, you will have to examine that whether it is a works contract or not. If it is a works contract, then the rate of works contract will be applicable. As simple as that. That you are providing a service of works contract. So whatever input you are claiming, input you are having, you can take credit of that because you are providing output supply also as a works contract, and therefore you will be eligible for credit. So that will be a GST implication, that it will fall into the definition of section 2 clause 119 under works contract, and therefore the credit will be allowed and the rate of works contract will be applicable. Yes.
Next question. Where a person supplying both taxable goods and exempted goods, whether a tax invoice cum bill of supply can be issued having both details?
I think they have inserted a rule wherein they have allowed that you can issue the tax invoice cum bill of supply. The rule has been issued. Since we have not covered the rules part, I think that is not touched upon, but so far as I remember, the rule is there. आपको ध्यान है अमित? The rule is certainly there because ये amendment आया था. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah, rule 46A. Rule 46A was inserted wherein they have said, notwithstanding anything contained in rule 46 or 49 or 54, where a registered person is supplying taxable as well as exempted goods or services or both to an unregistered person. So it is specific to an unregistered person. A single invoice cum bill of supply may be issued for all such supplies. So if you are making a supply of taxable as well as exempted to an unregistered person, then it is possible. But if it is not made to an unregistered person, then this rule is not applicable. Rule is rule 46A of the CGST rules. Yeah.
Next question. When supplier is registered, then also we need self-invoicing in case of RCM?
No, friend. Section 31, subsection 3, clause E and F is very clear. They say when you are procuring from an unregistered person and the RCM liability is there, in that case only the self-invoicing is required. In other cases, the self-invoicing is not required as per what is stated in the law. It says where a registered person who is liable to pay tax under subsection 3 or 4 shall issue an invoice in respect of both received by him from the supplier who is not registered on the date of receipt of the goods or services. So if he is registered, then no need. If he is not registered, then only it will be required.
Next.
Yes, next.
The government department passes the bill on 31st March 2020 and reflected in 26 AS in March quarter and payment received on 7th April. Then when the bill will be issued?
Passes the bill on 31st March, reflected in March quarter, that means the same month, and the payment is received on 7th April, then when the bill will be issued. But what is this pertaining to? Is it pertaining to the continuous supply of service? If it is pertaining to continuous supply of service, then in that case, you need to refer the law. The law says that you need to issue an invoice where the date of payment is confirmed, then the date of payment is the date of issuance of invoice. If it is not mentioned in the contract, then the date when you are receiving it, that will be the date of invoice. And the third was where the event is linked, so the completion of event. So what is the question? is it related to continuous supply of service? Then in that case, I would simply answer कि government department has passed the bill. So when you have completed this service, that also is very relevant. If you have completed this service on 31 March or maybe on 15th March, then you have the time limit within the provisions of the CGST rules that you can issue an invoice in case of services within 30 days of the completion of service. So you just refer that. If it is within within the time period of 30 days, then certainly you can issue in April also. Otherwise, if it is not there, then you will have to stick with the rules. Let's say आपका 1 फरवरी को खत्म हो गया था, तो आपको तो 30 दिन के अंदर 2 मार्च तक जो भी आपका 30 दिन हो रहा था वहां तक आपको इनवॉइस करना ही था. वहां पे पेमेंट 26 years डज नॉट मेक एनी डिफरेंस. बट अगर आपका 15 मार्च को खत्म हुआ तो 15 अप्रैल तक का टाइम आपके पास है, बिकॉज दे कैन नॉट ओवरराइड इट. सो एज पर मी, प्लीज consider that rule and accordingly you raise the invoice.
Next question. In case of goods sent for approval, we have to return the goods within 6 months if not approved. What about the case when return of goods cannot take place due to lockdown? Whether extended period would be available? Please guide.
100% it is available because the notification per se is telling कि जो भी आपका 20 मार्च से लेके 29 जून तक का जो भी टाइम पीरियड था, जहाँ पे टाइम बारिंग हो रहा था, जहाँ पे टाइम लिमिट खत्म हो रहा था, इसके बीच में जो भी फॉल करेगा, दैट इज एक्सटेंडेड टू 30th June. Certainly it is extended.
Next, where the goods are sent and the accounts are settled, making declaration that the amount has been deducted on basis of quality claim and no credit note is issued, that is, full tax has been paid on invoice value, whether it is correct practice?
Can you explain the question to me? Because it says where the goods are sent and the accounts are settled, making declaration that the amount has been deducted. तो आपने let me put an example, 1 लाख रुपए के goods भेजे. Now they are saying कि इसकी क्वालिटी ठीक नहीं है, तो I will be paying you only 70,000. बट जो 1 लाख के गुड्स भेजे थे उसमें आपने 18, let's say 18% was the rate, आपने 18,000 rupees टैक्स लगाया था. So what they have done is they have paid 17,000 plus 18,000, 75,000 plus 18,000. So if they are not issuing the credit note under this law, that is GST Act, जो सेक्शन 34 में उनको करना चाहिए था, तो I don't think that there is any problem, because the circulars and the explanations given by the government is clearly laying that even you can pass a discount in the books. It is not required that it should be a tax or it should have the tax impact also. तो मेरे ख्याल से आप कर सकते हैं, there is no problem.
Next, can bill of supply be issued where we recover amount from customer incurred in the capacity of pure agent, or what document to be issued in that case?
Now there is an invoice which is prescribed for a pure agent. You will have to issue an invoice wherein you will have to specify कि आपने क्या सर्विस दिया. लेट्स से मैं आरओसी की सर्विस दे रहा हूँ और आरओसी में मैंने 500 रुपए का उसके लिए चलन भरा, तो I will have to show that 500 rupees I am collecting which is to be paid to the ROC, and then 100 rupees I am collecting or 1000 rupees I am collecting for the professional fees. So that is a invoice which needs to be issued. You cannot issue a bill of supply for that.
Next, what has to be issued, whether debit note or tax invoice in case of receipt of interest against good?
You will have to issue a debit note. You will have to issue a debit note for the additional interest for delayed payment of tax or delayed payment of the amount, and that debit note will have to be properly issued as per the rules, और उसके basis पे आपको पूरा payment करना पड़ेगा. So certainly debit note has to be issued, not the invoice.
In respect of inward and outward supply register, do we have also maintained physical register along with data entries in system?
I've already answered that if your system is having a log file, if it has log file enabled wherein any editing, any changes or any deletions are recorded properly and systematically, then in that case you are not supposed to have anything maintained personally or physically. But in case the system does not have log file, then I am afraid that you will have to maintain it physically. That will be the better solution. Otherwise they might end up in a situation wherein they will not recognize your records as per the online system or the system, because that system does not have the log file. And the rule is very clear that you need to maintain these accounts or the documents electronically in a system where the log file is being created.
In section 34(2), the supplier can issue the credit note up to due date of return filing for September month following the end of the financial year, or up to 30th September following the end of the financial year.
Return filing for the no, how it can be two such kind of dates? I don't think so. Just a minute. ये क्या कह रहा है? But not later than September following the end of the financial year, in which such supply was made, or the date of furnishing of relevant annual return, whichever is earlier. So it is not having or up to 30th September. तो पहला वाला लिंब आपका ठीक है, जहाँ पे इसने तो पहले वाले लिंब में आपको ये लिखना था द ड्यू डेट ऑफ फाइलिंग ऑफ एनुअल रिटर्न और 30th September following the end of the financial year, whichever is earlier. That is the situation. So 16(4) में और इसमें केवल यही डिफरेंस है. 16(4) में it is September return under section 39 ड्यू डेट उसका और द डेट ऑफ फाइलिंग ऑफ एनुअल रिटर्न. और यहाँ पे जो है, यहाँ पे ये दे रहा है नॉट लेटर देन September following the end of the financial year in which such supply was made, or the date of furnishing of the relevant annual return, whichever is earlier. So यहाँ पे date of furnishing of annual return, it is the same provision which is there in 16(4), except वहाँ पे due date for section 39 return under for the month of September है और यहाँ पे 30th September directly है. So the question I think is framed wrongly. Yeah.
Next, every owner of godown shall maintain records of the consignee and other relevant details of the good in such manner as may be prescribed.
So what is the question?
There is no question written in it. Next, what records are required to be maintained at godown or sale counter, as accounts are maintained at only office?
See, if you are having a godown and a sale counter, then you need to maintain those records which are important and required to be maintained there. Let's take an example. Godown में आपका माल आता होगा, godown से आपका माल जाता होगा, so you need to have an inward register, an outward register, challan, copy. So all those records which are pertaining to the godown activities must be maintained at godown, and rest of the documents can be maintained at the office. That is not an issue. So जो भी records हैं आपके, जो आपको लगता है important है, वो maintain करने पड़ेंगे आपको godown के अंदर ही, as per the provisions of section 35 read with rules.
Just want to add for that question for citation of office sharing. The citation is of AAAR Kerala. It's Spaceland Office Solutions Private Limited.
मैंने वही बोला ना, space करके कुछ था, लेकिन I was not remembering that name. Yes,
yeah.
you repeat the citation.
Yeah,
हाँ, बोल दीजिए ना please.
Spaceland Office Solutions Private Limited. Order number is KER/55/2019, dated 15th July 2019.
Right. Spaceland, correct.
Now we'll go for last question for the day.
No worries.
It's person having only interest income on bank.
I think let us take 3-4 questions more, because we have started late today. So let us take 3-4 questions, because 78 is the slide. You take it up till 80-81. Let us deal with it. Yeah.
Persons having only interest income on bank and other deposits more than 20 lakhs. So I think the question is regarding the registration. I don't think that see in this case what is happening is that the turnover, aggregate turnover, this will constitute the part of aggregate turnover, and therefore the aggregate turnover is exceeding 20 lakhs. But since there is no taxability in this, it is absolutely exempt. So I will fall into section 23 and the registration will not be required. Sorry. Yeah. Next, when a service is treated as completed, any guidelines?
There are no specific guidelines, but there are few cases where there are few litigative issues wherein it has been held that service is said to be completed not only when you say that it is completed but also when the payment is getting settled. जैसे एक एग्जांपल देता हूँ, अभी कोविड 2019 में कल भी हम एक सेशन में थे तो यहाँ पे ये एक डिस्कशन चल रहा था। तो जैसे अभी कोविड 2019 चल रहा है और लॉकडाउन चल रहा है, तो आपने आपके में से कई लोग और मेरे जैसे कई लोगों को ये शायद स्ट्रगल करना पड़ेगा that if we have entered into a contract of let's say a lakh of rupees for a particular work, काम कर देने के बाद हमने ये मान लिया कि कंप्लीट हो गया, we have raised the invoice, but now the person's situation might have changed and then he will say कि no, I will not be in a position to give 1 lakh rupees to you, you charge whatever is your cost, और 50,000 rupees आप ले लीजिए, 60,000 rupees आप ले लीजिए. So you cannot charge tax on me saying that my service was completed and therefore you are liable for 1 lakh rupees. There are settled principle which says not only the completion of service, when it is regarded as completed, when the payment is also settled. तो जब तक मेरा 40,000 का पता लग रहा पेमेंट आ रहा है तो मैं 1 लाख रुपए पे टैक्स देके अगर जाऊंगा तो हाउ वुड आई सर्वाइव? सो इट डिपेंड्स ऑन द फैक्ट्स एंड सर्कमस्टेंसेस कि कितना बड़ा इम्पैक्ट है उसका, अकॉर्डिंगली यू कैन लिटिगेट दिस इशू. बट मेरा मानना है कि कंप्लीटेड तब भी माना नहीं जाएगा जब आपके हिसाब से कंप्लीट हो गया, कंप्लीटेड तब माना जाएगा जब आपने कंप्लीट कर दिया और सामने वाले ने उस इनवॉइस को एक्सेप्ट कर दिया और अकॉर्डिंगली पे किया, देन it will be deemed to be completed, otherwise not. This is my view.
Next, if registered person supply exempt goods but by mistake collect GST at the rate 18%, as said in lecture, it's an offense. But when wrong rate of tax charged by supplier, you said ITC can be available to recipient in full. Contradictory opinion. Please clarify.
See, there is a specific provision for the first limb, section 76, that you have wrongly collected tax. It was exempt, but आपने बोल दिया कि नहीं ये taxable है और आपने टैक्स कलेक्ट कर लिया. अब आपने टैक्स कलेक्ट कर लिया तो वो भरना भी पड़ेगा, लेकिन आप ये मान के चलिए यहाँ पे कॉन्ट्ररी ओपिनियन नहीं है, व्यू नहीं है, बिकॉज अगर आपने एग्जेम्प्टेड गुड्स थे फिर भी आपने इनवॉइस पे 18% लगा दिया और आपने टैक्स कलेक्ट कर लिया तो वो क्रेडिट आप 18% ले सकते हो. सेम ही तो व्यू है. आपने एग्जेम्प्टेड को 18% चार्ज किया और उसका इनवॉइस इशू कर दिया 18% का, और बाद में आपको पता चला ये तो एग्जेम्प्टेड है, तो सेक्शन 76 ने बोला कि आप उसको, आपको नोटिस इशू होगा और आपने भरना पड़ेगा ये पैसा, तो वो आपने भर दिया. तो सामने वाले को इनवॉइस जब मिला है, उसको अगर 18 का मिला है तो 18 और उसको 12 का मिला है तो 12, ही विल टेक द क्रेडिट अकॉर्डिंगली. और जो दूसरा लिम्ब है वो भी वही है कि जहाँ पे रॉन्ग टैक्स रेट लगा है, 5 की जगह 12 लगा दिया, तो भी आप पूरा आईटीसी ले सकते हो. आई डोंट फाइंड दैट देयर इज अ कॉन्ट्ररी व्यू और कॉन्ट्ररी ओपिनियन, बट स्टिल आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट यू टू एलाबोरेट मोर. हो सकता है कि मेरे क्वेश्चन समझने में कुछ गलती हो रही हो, सो यू कैन एक्सप्लेन दिस फर्दर एंड देन वी कैन टेक इट अगेन.
Mr. A supplied goods to Mr. B of rupees 100 at the rate 18%. Actual rate of tax as per HSN is say 12%.
So there is no problem. He has charged 18%. तो उसको 18% भरना पड़ेगा. If he pays 18%, the other person will get the credit of 18%, and it is a revenue neutral situation. लेकिन हाँ, अगर वो 18% कलेक्ट करता है और 12 ही भरता है, then there is a problem. फिर 76 इन्वोक होगा और या फिर नोटिस इशू आएगा 73, 74 में, and he will have to pay that amount, because that will lead to unjust enrichment of this person, not of the government. Yes.
Override the
You need to. Yeah, please.
override the
Override
GST not able to read. Override the GST and HSN in tax invoice.
Invoice.
It is clerical error. So problem of this mistake in auditing.
Means?
Not able to understand, sir.
I think the question is not clear. Kajal ji, if you can clarify this question, we'll take up further. Because अगर ये questions clear नहीं होंगे, why I'm taking this, why I'm asking this to be clarified, because अगर आप clarify नहीं करेंगे, then we'll have to skip these questions from the compilation also, because the question is not there. तो आप अगर ये clarify कर देंगे, then at least it will be part of compilation. That is the only intention. I think this can be the last question.
Okay. Mr. X, having registration in MP, has a shop in UP which has been let out. Is Mr. X required to take registration in UP for discharging his tax liability from shop rent, or can he charge IGST on such services? as though the location of immovable property is in UP, but the fixed or permanent establishment is located in MP.
See, there is no question of fixed or permanent establishment. You need to appreciate that place of supply. You are rightly mentioning that the place of supply in this case will be UP because the property is located at UP. But at the same time, location of supplier, you are the location, you are the supplier, and you are located at MP, and therefore location of supplier is MP, place of supply is UP, and these two are in different states, and therefore it will become an interstate supply, and IGST invoice can certainly be raised. So certainly you can raise an IGST invoice and collect the tax and pay it accordingly. You are not supposed to take registration in UP unless you have some business or some existence or some residing factor or some business there. Otherwise you are not supposed to take, because ऐसे बहुत सारे केसेस में हमारे पास क्वेरीज आती हैं जहाँ पे मैं तो रिलायंस में जॉब करता हूँ, आई एम वाइस प्रेसिडेंट रिलायंस and I have various houses, various properties at various places, and I have let those properties on rent. तो क्या मैं बार सब जगह जाके रजिस्ट्रेशन लूंगा? The answer is no. The answer is no, because your location is in one state and the property is in another state. Place of supply is another state, and therefore it will become an interstate supply, और IGST पे आप लगा के टैक्स कलेक्ट कर सकते हैं. So shall we stop here, Amit bhai?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine friends. So once again we are able to complete this fourth query session of this, और एक दिन और आज हमने complete किया, and I'm once again thankful to each one of you. थोड़ा सा आज हम delay हो गए because of the earlier session, and we'll try to make up this also. और last session जैसे मैंने कहा, we'll try to do it live so that we can interact, question answers हम उस तरीके से handle कर सकें. So at the outset I would like to thank each one of you once again for giving the opportunity.
एक और सर मेरी तरफ से सॉरी बोलना है. एक्चुअली आज की जो पीपीटी थी उसमें थोड़े कुछ क्वेश्चन थे, वो लास्ट टाइम वाले रिपीट ज्यादा थे, तो वो एक्चुअली जल्दबाजी में कुछ स्लाइड्स रह गई थी, इसके लिए वो क्वेश्चन वापस से आए हुए थे.
नो वरीज, नो वरीज.
तो उसके लिए सॉरी, थोड़ा जल्दी में करने में वो क्वेश्चन स्लाइड्स रिपीट हो गई.
ठीक है, नो प्रॉब्लम, नो प्रॉब्लम. चलिए, एनीवेज थैंक यू सो मच. Let us meet tomorrow for IGST. We'll be starting IGST Act from tomorrow. Thank you so much.